What's going on, everybody? My name is Tim Relswick, and today we're talking about how to make multi-dimensional and interesting characters in your narrative in your game. And before we start, I just want to say that I'm not an expert in this. I'm learning storytelling myself, but because of that, I've been reading a lot of stuff. I've been doing a lot of research. I've been looking at a lot of characters, and I've been examining a lot of the characters in my own life that have kind of influenced me growing up and why I like or dislike certain characters and kind of how that feels. So definitely not an expert, but I just kind of want to share my thoughts and opinions on creating interesting characters. Because the way that I would kind of say this is there are some characters that I feel exist in stories, but they could be replaced with another character and all of the story elements could still happen. And I feel like every time I see that in a movie or a game or whatever, it just kind of frustrates me because I'm like, what? That character doesn't need to be that person. Like, you could change his race, his gender, his identity, anything at all, and you could just replace that person and throw it in there, and then it's the same story could happen. And I feel like that is a mistake because interesting stories, the ones that grab me, are the ones that have people that I feel like only they could live that story, if it makes sense. So a perfect example of this is like Batman, right? Batman had his parents murdered when he was a kid. He went into a really dark place, right? He decided to punish criminals. He wanted to punish them. He didn't want to stop crime. He didn't want to, become a police officer to lock them up. He didn't want to do it. He wanted to punish them. He wanted to beat the shit out of them. So he learned a bunch of fighting and all kinds of stuff. He went and studied for many years, and he spends his time in a deep, dark cave, becoming what represents this dark sense of fear. And then he goes out and he interacts with criminals in a way that hurts them. He doesn't want to kill them. He doesn't want to lock them up. He wants to hurt them. And it says a lot about Batman and who he is and like what he became. If you take Bruce Wayne and you replace him with some other kind of character, the whole story falls apart because they don't have the same motivation or drive as Batman does. And I feel like if you look at something like Superman, right? He came to Earth in a pod. He had a bunch of superpowers, and then he grew up with good parents, and then he does what he's supposed to. I find that way less interesting. Like, oh, he's like super powerful and like he can just kill everybody all the time, but like he had good parents, so he's, cool. Like, you could replace Superman with any other superhero that has superpowers and put him in that same situation, and it's just like it could be the same thing. The same thing could happen. And I feel like that example is probably the core of what this video is about. Like the narrative storytelling, like there are 1,000 different ways to tell a story, right? But it just comes down to picking characters and using motivations that really, really, really make sense. And like, this is something I personally struggle with a lot in Philophobia because like I wanted to make this thing feel real. Like in the beginning of my game, this character is in a relationship and his girlfriend breaks up with him and he commits suicide. And like that I feel is really powerful. It indicates his kind of feelings, but it's also like it's very telling of who he is and where he ties his identity to. I've struggled with the kind of character and the things that he goes through because I feel like I want that sense of story that like only Stuart could be in that situation. And there are different elements that I've been playing around with, but I've learned in my research and kind of studying the stuff that I like that one the being in a position to have a character that has to be in that position that no other character could enact those things, no other characters has the same motivations or the same ideas, is really, really important. But the other thing I think is that a character isn't interesting if you can predict exactly what they're going to do all the time. And like with Superman, you can kind of predict everything that he's going to do. He's always going to do the good thing. It's always going to be, fine and dandy. And I feel like characters like Batman, not to push this example to death, but there's a sense of moral ambiguity there, right? Like, he's not necessarily a good guy. He's not necessarily a hero. Sometimes he does bad things. Sometimes he breaks the law. Sometimes he follows people or has surveillance on them, or like destroys their property, or does 1,000 things that technically would be breaking a law. And, does that make him bad or does that make him good? Like, if he goes out of his way to like cause harm and punish people, is that good or is it bad? And the same thing with like the Punisher. The Punisher is one of my favorite characters ever, because like his entire family, his entire bloodline was murdered, right? And he has a similar thing to Batman. He just wants to punish people. He wants criminals to feel the pain that he felt. And I feel like that sense of emotion and that kind of like way that you play with the character's sense of the lines in between the lines in between black and white, their moral ambiguity, the way that you don't know whose side they're on, and you can understand their personality, but you don't necessarily understand the specific things that they're going to do. They're predictable, but they're unpredictable. I think can add a little bit of intrigue to characters. So this definitely isn't an end-all be-all video of character development. It's definitely not something that I'm an expert in, but it's just kind of a quick thing that I wanted to share on character development and kind of making interesting stories. There's going to be a lot more stuff on this to come because it's something I'm actively studying and I'm trying to put into practice with my game. And as I kind of learn some more stuff, I'll be sharing it with you guys. But I appreciate you watching. If you have any comments on this, or you agree, disagree, either way, let me know down in the comments below, because I would love to hear from you. Once again, my name is Tim Ruswick, and I'll see you again tomorrow.